Hello, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Rosen Sports Monday. This will air whenever it airs, but I'm just so thrilled to have a special guest with me today. I've been trying to lock in here, Gavin Kaysen, and we'll get into Gavin's vast background and his restaurant background and everything else involved with the Twin Cities. But before we do, I want to thank our sponsor, Lexus of Wayzata, Lexus of Maplewood, my good friend Charlie Swanson. I mentioned the other day I went out and I took a deep dive. I'm finally spoiled myself at my young age to get a new Lexus. I leased one, and Lexus RX. It's the best driving vehicle I've ever had in my life. It's a fabulous place to go and check them out for yourself. Great staff, great service department, et cetera, et cetera. So we'll hear from Lexus a little bit later, but I want to thank them, of course, for sponsoring our podcast. Gavin Kaysen, executive chef. I had to list all these things here. We were just talking about Spoon and Stable, Bellicor Bakery, Mara, which is, of course, in the Four Seasons. Opened one in Naples, Florida. Demi, which is my wife and I, is one of our favorite special places to go for dinner. The Merchant Room, right?
Yep, that's in Naples.
Two-time recipient of the James Beard Award. Executive chef. I mean, you go on and on and on. And I think about your humble beginnings here. I mean, also in the Twin Cities, but you were born in Thousand Oaks, California. Is that correct?
That's right.
So tell us about your travails from getting from Thousand Oaks, California to kind of breaking your teeth here in the restaurant business in the Twin Cities.
So my dad was in the medical devices business. And so we were in Thousand Oaks, California, and then we left there and went to Chicago. And he got a job in Chicago, and I lived just outside of Chicago in Lake Bluff, Illinois, which is a suburb. And now it's more famously known because even when I lived there as a kid in Lake Forest, which was the town next to us,
very nice town,
beautiful town.
Yeah,
but Mr. T moved in.
Oh no!
And when he moved in, he cut down all these trees because he allegedly was like allergic to them or something, and he didn't ask for city approval. And so he cut all the trees down. And then I just remember he hosted a big pool party for all of us because he felt so bad that he cut all these beautiful picturesque trees down on this sort of main street in Lake Forest. And Walter Payton lived in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
And what I recall about Walter Payton was when we would go trick-or-treating, he wouldn't give us candy. He'd give us football cards.
Oh my goodness. Well, that's where the Bears had their, I remember going to Lake Forest.
Yeah.
When they had a lot of ex-Vikings that were up there. But I covered the Bears, one of the most picturesque training camp sites that you could possibly find anywhere in the National Football League.
And we lived there during the Bears' heyday, during like the Super Bowl shuffle. And all the stuff
Jim McMahon and Walter Payton and the whole gang.
It was pretty cool. So we went from there, and then I moved to Minnesota. My parents moved back. They're both from St. Paul.
Right.
So I was 7, and I grew up in Bloomington.
Interesting. But then I always read this story, and I know you've talked about it before. Everyone has a story about what inspired you to become a chef. And you were working at Subway in Bloomington.
Yeah.
Now, don't tell me that by working at Subway, making sandwiches and watching people add on every ingredient known to man, like my son used to do, that turned you into this massive, successful chef.
It was really the guy next door. So there was a guy named George Serra who was building a Italian restaurant next door. And it was supposed to be kind of a fast casual pasta restaurant where you could like walk in and you could get, think of like a D'Amico, like the D'Amico and Sons kind of vibe, but quicker in a way. And so he moves in next door. He's building this out, and he would come in and he'd order a 4-inch tuna fish sandwich on a round bun every Saturday. I memorized everyone's order. I had a sheet, Rosie, of everybody's order that would come in every day because...
That's impressive.
Well, the thing is, for me, what I realized at an early age, I was only 16 years old at the time. If I would memorize their order, the line wouldn't be so long. And in my mind, I could work faster. And so then if you would come in and I knew what your order was, I'd say, okay, Rosie, your order's at the register. I'll see you tomorrow. And then, somebody behind, Joe is behind you, and Joe's like, oh, is he your dad? And I said, no, he just comes in 5 days a week. And so I memorized his order. And so George saw this, and he was like, this kid's both crazy and something's wrong with him. So he would watch me, and listen, as a 15, 16-year-old kid, you're not thinking about anything too much in your future, let alone, this is 30 years ago, did I think that cooking was even an opportunity as a profession. I would wear my hat backwards. I'd make my sandwiches. I'd go out. And he would say, you have a real gift with food and you have a real gift with people. And I think you should find a way to maybe, consider it as your future. And I didn't even know what it meant. I remember sitting down with my parents and explaining to my parents what it meant, but I had no clue it would turn into this.
Well, that's a quantum leap between making sandwiches and memorizing them at Subway and turning into a world famous chef like you are and restaurateur. The thing that gets me, and I was thinking about this the other day, and you mentioned you were 15. I don't know what your world was like in high school at that time, but I remember growing up, and it was the old school traditional. The guys would take shop class.
Yeah.
The girls would take home ec.
Yep.
And I'm thinking, well, home ec involves math. I mean, it's all the stuff that you have to learn. And I remember even thinking at the time, not that I was going to be a chef, but I thought, well, I want to take some cooking classes, but I wasn't allowed to. I was the traditional role of go make some plastic wood carving thing or whatever, that the guys would have to make. But I mean, all that has fortunately changed, but that was the world we grew up in, the kind of the Leave It to Beaver, Ozzie and Harriet kind of world where, the woman would be the apron in the kitchen and the guys would be coming home from work and, the meals would be prepared for them. And think about it, I'm a little older, but really wasn't that long ago where those traditional roles were in place.
Well, I'll tell you, when I was in high school, I was the only boy in home ec. I took both.
So you had an option.
I took both wood shop class one semester, and I took home ec the second semester. And Mrs. Klisch was my teacher.
This is at where now?
Holy Angels.
Okay.
And she was my teacher, and I was the only boy in that class. But yeah, we learned how to cook. You learned how to take care of plants. You learned how to do all of to your point,
right?
You learned how to do all these stereotypical things that were meant only for the wife or the female or the woman of the household, and then all the guys are in the shop class. But what's funny is that the shop class didn't interest me. I mean, it was boring. And
they were,
I was like, I don't really care about tool. And I still don't I don't care about the tools and the sawing and none of that's exciting to me. I'd rather, give me a whole chicken and a bottle of red wine and some vegetables, and I'll make a beautiful coq au vin for dinner while you're building whatever you're building.
Well, did it hit you right away that this was something that not only you're going to be proficient at, but that you have a passion for during that time? I mean, that's still a pretty formidable young age to think that, at 18, 19, 20, this is what I want to do. And I don't know how your parents have thought about it and encouraged you to go and pursue your dream.
I mean, I knew early on that this was something that filled kind of a soul bucket inside of me. I didn't know what it was. I couldn't pinpoint it then, but I knew at an early age, when I was about 17, I knew that I was more excited to go to work and cook than I was to go to a party in high school. And I would purposely skip those parties on Fridays and Saturday nights to go out with all of my buddies and hang out at some field and, whatever, because I'd rather cook.
That's interesting. And your friends were accepting of that? Or
they still come and eat, and they're like, do you remember that one party you came to after the kitchen? Or do you remember that one party you showed up to and you made us all a pasta dish? And I'm like, yeah.
Well,
sure I did.
You stood out. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, that's a unique skill that a lot of 17-year-olds aren't going to, I mean, they're busy thinking about where I'm going to McDonald's or where my next meal, maybe maybe putting some Velveeta cheese on something like now I did in my.
Who do I DoorDash from?
Yeah, exactly. So that spurred your interest, and then kind of how quickly did that road lead you to the kind of success that you obviously have today? But it's a long process.
Yeah. Between
that, learning, cooking for your friends and doing things for your parents, and ending up where you are today.
Yeah, and I give my parents a lot of credit because I tried college for a year, and I just it didn't inspire me, and it didn't inspire me because I knew what I wanted to do for a living. I knew I always wanted to cook, and so I thought, why am I in anthropology class when I want to cook food for a living? Like, how is this supposed to better me?
Well, no, you were back in the Twin Cities then.
Yeah, so I was at University of Wisconsin Oshkosh.
What year is this now?
So I graduated high school in 1998.
Okay, because I'm thinking, having grown up here, and I start thinking about the traditional restaurants that I went with my parents or my buddies, and a lot of them were. I mean, one of them was family owned. I mentioned Dinopolis a lot, the Piazza family, which owned Italian restaurant where my dad worked near downtown for Paramount Pictures, and he would literally go to Dinopolis every single day for lunch with all his coworkers, and I knew he would be there, and so I'd go there and have, I'd get spaghetti to go, spaghetti meatball to go. It'd be $2.50.
Wow.
And that included a salad. We had Charlie's.
Yep.
We had Murray's is still around, obviously, but there's some really good restaurants, traditional ones, but there wasn't we didn't have the variety that obviously exists now. It wasn't a foodie town back then. It's kind of a steak and potatoes type of.
Yeah, I mean, you remember like Steak and Ale off of 494.
Oh my God.
Like Kincaid's, which is still around.
Yeah,
but again, like Kincaid's back in the day, especially in Bloomington, like that was kind of new and hot. And oh my gosh,
this was always listed
place.
The number one restaurant too by Minneapolis St. Paul magazine.
Yeah.
Number one, Kincaid's.
Yeah.
It's good, but I thought, come on, it's got
a pea salad made out of an ice cream scooper. I still remember it.
So what? Tell us about your travels then. I mean, how you go from being interested and being passionate about it to being this world famous, successful chef right now and restaurateur, because there's the business side of it.
Yeah.
There's the food side of it, the family side of it, and everything else that's involved at a young age, and the energy level that it takes to be Gavin Kaysen.
Well, I went to culinary school in Vermont. So this is in 1999. And the way that New England Culinary Institute was set up is you would do 6 months of school and intense. Like it wasn't like 3 hours of class a day. They basically worked you like you worked in a restaurant. So if you were in school over Thanksgiving and Christmas, you went to school on Thanksgiving Day. You went to school on Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, because in their mind, they said, well, when you get into the industry, you're not off. So why are you going to be off in school? And then all of a sudden you get out of the industry, you get out of school, and now you're working those days. We're going to teach you the way that you're going to be working in the industry. So you would more or less go to school 5 or 6 days a week.
Oh, okay.
And you got out of school for 6 months and you could do an internship anywhere in the country. My first one was at Domaine Chandon in Napa Valley. And I worked there for 6 months. And that was a really influential time of my life, because I was 20 years old.
My goodness.
And, I turned 21 when I was there. I had never really lived that far away from home. I had never lived that close to agriculture and terroir and gardens and grapes and winemakers and all these sort of like what I would consider artisans and craftspeople around me. And then I went back to school for 6 months. Your second internship, you're allowed to go anywhere in the world. And I took that very seriously. And my dad was in Switzerland a lot for business. Every 6 weeks, he was managing a company over there. And he would come back and he'd say, I go to this restaurant, Gavin, called Auberge de la Vaux. And it's beautiful. There's the chef, his name is Jackie Vouillet. And when we show up, he just cooks for us. And I said, wow, that's cool. I want to go work there. So I called Jackie on the phone. And I said, my name's Gavin Kaysen. My father, David, eats there every 6 weeks with his company. This is what it's called. I'd love to come work for you for 6 months. And he asks me 2 questions. He says, are you coming to work and make money, or are you coming to learn? And I says, I'm coming to learn. Just please pay me enough to pay rent.
Right.
And he says, how much is rent? I said, it's $400 a month.
Oh my.
He said, I'll pay you $450. I'm like, maybe I should learn how to negotiate better. So I moved to Switzerland, and I remember having lunch with my mom and dad, and Jackie comes and sits down, and he says, he's explaining to me the way the kitchen works and the restaurant. And we're in Lausanne. We're sort of like perched up halfway a mountain, and the view from the kitchen was the French Alps.
Oh,
and
my
the view
goodness.
from the kitchen to the left was the Italian Alps, and we lived in the Swiss Alps, and below us was Lake Geneva. And I said, so do I work lunch or dinner service? Because in America, you either work a lunch shift or a dinner shift. And he says, I'm not sure I understand the question. He says, let me explain to you how you work. You come into work at 7 a.m., you work through lunch, you get done at 3 p.m., you're allowed a 2-hour break, go down to the lake, go swimming, go home, take a nap, whatever you want to do. You come back at 5 p.m., we'll feed you dinner, and then we start service at 6 p.m., and you'll be done by midnight, and it's only 5 days a week.
Wow.
I said, okay,
great. Sign me up. When you were first going through those stages and working at such an established restaurant, because I think most people still, I know we do, I know Karen does, my wife, I mean, you're looking at recipes a lot. You're looking at a cookbook. You're looking at little things to study, and literally these are the ingredients. This is how you prepare it and everything else. Was that your standard bear as far as learning how not just the basics, but the exquisite dishes that you ended up making? Or was a lot of it ended up being by trial and error?
I think it's a little of both. I think one, you absorb these tidbits of knowledge from these chefs, like you were speaking about earlier about traditional restaurants.
Right.
I mean, it was the same over there. I mean, like living in Switzerland and then living in London and then coming back to America. I mean, the amount of knowledge that I gained from just the European travel and the European mindset and really the tradition mindset, of saying like, okay, here's a cheese that we eat in Switzerland and we only get this cheese 6 weeks a year. And in my mind, I'm like, I'm coming from a world in which in America, at least, you can get strawberries every day of the year. But why would you eat them when they're not good? Why would you eat them when they're out of season? And that's their mindset, right? And so they're saying, this is the best cheese you can buy right now. This is the best fish you can buy right now. I remember going down to Lake Geneva and we would get the little perch because we would cook filet de perch. And it was a classic Swiss dish. You'd cook perch in a pan. You'd serve it with French fries and brown butter sauce, parsley and lemon. And we would cook so much of them. But when the perch weren't perfectly in season, you wouldn't get it. And the guests wouldn't complain about it. They would understand that you're respecting what it is. So you learn recipes by way of tradition and by way of trial and error, by way of research and development, reading things, and honestly, going out to eat.
It sounds as if, I've seen plenty of the Stanley Tucci sort of stories,
Sure.
and watching Italy and everything else that the Europeans have kind of figured it out, that they have an appreciation for the real art of cooking. Did you find that to be true when you've come back here?
Yeah.
You've applied a lot of that here.
And it's very regional. And I think America is becoming so much better in that and so much more proficient in what that looks like. I mean, I feel as though now we're starting to actually understand and see in the United States what regional cooking really looks like. It really started in the 80s with California cuisine, which was before my time of cooking because I was born in 79. So I was a baby when that all happened. But in the 80s, you had Wolfgang Puck,
right.
You had Alice Waters, you had then Thomas Keller, Michael Mina. You had all of these chefs that started to really create this what is California cuisine? I mean, you had the restaurant stars. So, when you look back and you see, this is the first, I think, I wouldn't say first, but this is one of the most interesting times of our profession because we have people that are in the generation before me that are in their 70s who effectively helped create what regional cuisine looks like in the United States. And we're the next generation to then inherit it and to really tell the next chapter of that story. And this is the first time that it's ever been so well documented.
Yeah.
It's never been so well documented before. So even thinking about this from a long-term perspective, what do these chefs like Michael Mina, Danielle Boulud, Thomas Keller, Wolfgang Puck, Alice Waters, what do they do with the empires that they've created when they're ready to pass on that to the next generation? That doesn't mean physically give the restaurants away, but just the intentional amount of knowledge that then gets passed on to us. What do we do with it? And it's a really important part of our life.
Was there one turning point as you're going through this whole process, especially learning how to really cook at that level and create, where the business part of it crept in and going, okay, I'm going to eventually obviously return to States, return to Minnesota, and I want to start my own restaurants. I want to do this, but that takes a whole lot more than just knowing how to make the dishes.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a whole business aspect because we know, I was technically in the restaurant business for a while, not an easy business to get into and to maintain and to succeed in.
Yeah. I would say the PhD of the restaurant business for me when it came to the business side was when I was with Danielle in New York.
Okay.
When I was in San Diego working there, so I'd moved back from Europe and landed in San Diego, California, by way of throwing a dart at a map, to be clear. And I spent a few years there, and then I moved to New York City. And when I was with Danielle's team, he had 4 restaurants when I started with the restaurant group. When I left, he had 18. So that was in 7 years. That's an exceptional amount of growth in 7 years. And that was from Vegas to Singapore.
Oh.
But what I learned was how to run it as a business and do it in a way that is sort of like non-emotional, but thoughtful and genuine and clear. And so I always knew that I wanted to own my own restaurant, but I never knew what it meant. And like I talk to a lot of young cooks and y'all say, well, what's your dream? I'll say, well, one day I want to own my own restaurant. And I'll say, what does that mean to you? Right? Because does it mean you want to have a 30-seat restaurant and you want to be able to be open 5 nights a week and have weekends off and sort of create your own energy, you can do that. But that might mean the restaurant only does 1.5 million a year. And if you're making 5% to that margin, can you live off of that?
Right.
So, you talk through all these things, but the business aspect is super interesting part of our bit.
Was there a trial and error in terms of, learning sometimes the hard way as far as how to navigate yourself through those troubled waters, dealing with people who specialize in, leasing, buying buildings, turning them into restaurants? I mean, that to me, I get the shakes just thinking about that sometimes. And I know you've gone through a lot of that.
Yeah. I think what I've learned throughout the years accidentally is that you have to walk into the room and realize you are not the smartest person in the room. And that's an advantage. Don't walk into the room and think I know it. And if you walk in with too much of an ego, I think that's where people fail so quickly. I often look back at Spoon and Stable. It's 11 and a half years that restaurant's been open. And I remember somebody asking me early on, they said, did you ever imagine Spoon and Stable would be this successful? And I said, yes, I always imagined it, but I never imagined how I'd get there. And they looked at me and they said, that's an interesting answer. I said, but listen, do you have ever imagined Michael Jordan thinking to himself, I don't want that shot to win the championship? Of course he wants to take the shot.
Sure.
Of course Gretzky wants to take that shot. Of course Kaprizov wants to take that shot. But how you get there is the journey. And that journey is what you need to go through and understand that those are going to be the ups and downs. You're going to have tons of trial and error. You're going to walk into a room thinking that you know how to lease this building, but you have no idea how to ask for it. What is TI? What is all of this stuff that, it's like, I'm a cook.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the day, I'm a cook. And so when I sit down and I make lease negotiations with a landlord, I have to be prepared that they're going to walk away and say, bad deal. No. And you have to emotionally be prepared to say, It's okay. I'm ready to move on.
And we're talking to Gavin Kaysen, and fascinating conversation about the business of restaurants. And we're going to get into a lot of what's going on in the Twin Cities right now and in downtown Minneapolis in particular. You mentioned Spoon and Stable, which was your first big venture.
Yeah.
We talked before we went on air here about what that building was, because I remember, I had good old Rosen's Bar and Grill down in the warehouse district. And, the Loon is still there. Thankfully, the Loon is still there. This was early 90s. The Twins had gone to the World Series and et cetera, and things were kind of booming down there. But that was, a lot of sports bars. There's a lot of that stuff that was going on. The Pickled Parrot was down there, a few other things. But why did you settle on the space and the concept and feel like Spoon and Stable, which was kind of going against the grain of kind of the sports bar world or whatever else was going on, would succeed here?
So I watched Minneapolis from afar for a while to just sort of see where it was going. And I started to notice this trend nationally that chefs were spending time in major cities, New York, LA, Chicago, San Francisco, and then going back to their hometown and opening restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
Some were really successful at it and others weren't. But that wasn't because of the town so much as maybe the concept. When I decided to move back to Minneapolis, I remember coming home to visit my parents and I wanted to go eat at Bar La Grassa. It was a Tuesday night. And I called the restaurant and I said, is there any, I landed, it was 2 p.m. I landed. I said, any chance I could get a table for 4 tonight at 7 o'clock? And they said, earliest we have available is 9:30. And I thought, wow, earliest available on a Tuesday in Minneapolis is 9:30. I'm like, something's shifting here.
Right.
And so we ended up going in anyways. We just sat at the bar and eventually got in and had a great meal. But I watched how busy the restaurant was. And that's when I really started to pay attention to Minneapolis and notice okay, the city's starting to shift. People are traveling so much that they know what good food is. They know what good hospitality is. And they're now not afraid to say it, which is super important. And the Spoon and Stable space was an office building. The Smile Network was in it. My realtor, Carrie, at the time, she found the space. I kind of described to her what I wanted, which was big building, high ceilings, lots of brick. I didn't want it to be an old restaurant because I didn't want to carry the ghost. And I was willing to put money into build out. And so she found the Spoon space. And I walked in and I was like, wow, this is perfect, which is so funny.
It hit you right away.
The kitchen was cubicles.
Oh, no kidding.
The wine cellar was their front door. The bar was their boardroom. So you imagine I'm walking into this space and I'm like, this is perfect for a restaurant. And so I just sort of saw past what was the objects in front of me and really looked at the space. And across the street was Eric Dayton's Bachelor Farmer.
Right.
And Eric's dad at the time, Mark, was the governor of our state. And in my mind, right or wrong, I thought, well, if Eric bought real estate in this neighborhood, he must know something better than I know.
Yeah.
And so I decided to negotiate lease terms.
Yeah. And then you had to come up with a concept beyond everything else. You had this physical space, which turned out to be a gem of a place because the bar, the way it's situated, the intimacy of being there. But, was it a challenge to kind of come up with a unique menu that was going to be, understanding the taste of, sophisticated taste at this point of a lot of restaurateurs that love your food?
I think for me, the concept came from a genuine place of where would I want to eat and where would friends of mine want to eat? And the second part of that statement is actually the most important part, because where and how I eat is different than a lot of people. But my friends and where they want to eat, where they want to go is more what I would consider kind of mainstream in that world. I recognize Spoon is a place for some people, they can come often. And they do, because they've made it their home. People know who they are. It's kind of like their Cheers, right? And for some people, it's a special occasion, once a year restaurant. So for us, we have to create a menu and of what that looks like. But really, what's really the most important thing of a restaurant? It's how it makes you feel, right? That's really what it comes down to. Like if you make roasted chicken and I may make roasted chicken, but I make you feel better when you eat my roasted chicken, you'll always come back and have mine.
I love that take. Well, I can personalize that because, as you know, I first had coffee with my now wife, Karen, across the street at Bellicor when it was the bakery there. Yep. You happened to stop by that day. And then after you left and we had our greetings with each other, Karen was leaving. I had to go somewhere. And I said, well, you want to go out for dinner next week? She goes, yeah, on one condition. What's that? That we eat at Spoon and Stable. I went, I'm in trouble. And we went there, and I just remember we had a wonderful 3-hour dinner, and I knew I was in trouble when your wonderful bartender, Jessie, one of the best in the country, and she's earned that right, when Karen was asking for a specific type of glass, cocktail glass that she wanted. I went, oh boy, am I in trouble? I am way out of my league. But we made it work. And 3 hours later, we hit it off, and here we are 2+ years later, married, and first date, Spoon and Stable.
That's right.
So, hey, listen, we're going to take a quick break, come back and talk about some of your other projects, what you feel like the future of the Twin Cities restaurant scene is, some of the obstacles, some of the difficulties going on right now, post-COVID, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Talking to the one and only Gavin Kaysen. Stay with us here on Rosen Sports Monday. Hey, Rosie here for Lexus of Wayzata and Lexus of Maplewood. If you're in the market for a new luxury vehicle, look no further than my good friend Charlie Swanson at Lexus. Whether you're on the west or the east side of the Twin Cities, they have got you covered with 2 great locations, Lexus of Wayzata and Lexus of Maplewood. Check out the all-new Lexus TX, a spacious SUV with 3 rows of seating and plenty of room for all your gear. Head over to lexusofwayzata.com or lexusofmaplewood.com for details and to find your next ride today. And welcome back to Rosen Sports Monday, having a nice breezy conversation with Gavin Kaysen and his travels and journey to being maybe the restaurateur in the Twin City area and beyond. We talked about Spoon and Stable. You got a success going there. Now, are you getting restless? How do you decide, I want to push the button a little bit more, I want to expand, I have some other ideas, I have some different concepts I want to do? What was that process like? Because we've seen the development of so many other great Gavin Kaysen restaurants.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is, well, it's a couple of things. One, I have a lot of ideas in my head, and still do, of like things I want to create, things that I think are missing or that we can add to or create a different sort of language of. And then secondly, we have team. We have people who have worked for me for years, and they have ideas and they have things that they can contribute. And it's not about creating it before they leave. It's about creating what's right while they're there. And there are people that have worked for us who have gone on to create great success. Diane at Diane's Place, and Adam and Jeannie at Boucheron, and Joe and Lisa at Gia, and Yi at Vinay, and so on.
One thing I can see, and Carl and I talk about it a lot, is just really how personalized your staff is and how passionate they are. It doesn't happen by accident, as you mentioned. You get the right people in the right place. And I'm sure that entails also you being a good listener. It's not like you're just heavy-handed this is the way we're doing things,
Right.
take it or leave it. Otherwise,
Right.
it just wouldn't work. You could sense that there would be an uneasiness with the staff, and it's never that way. I mean,
Yeah.
everybody there is always so pleasant and engaging and knowledgeable. I mean, that's everything. When you ask a question about a wine or a dish, I've never been there, any of your places where there's a hesitation. Well, let me go ask somebody in the back what you're dealing with here. So there's an education process with that as well.
Yeah. Well, and I think a lot of that comes down to just like, it's trust, like I trust that they're going to want to know this information and they're going to do the best with it. I think what stumbles restaurant owners and specifically chef restaurant owners into greater success or growth is they get in their own way. They get in their own head. Again, a lot of it goes back to sort of this ego of like, I have to be the one that gets this credit. I have to be the one that receives the flowers. And it's like, no, if you have a great meal at the restaurant, I may have had nothing or very little to do with that meal. I mean, if you went to the bar and Jesse was your bartender,
right,
or you go to Belcourt and Andre's your bartender, they're the people serving you and really understanding like how to craft your night perfectly. And then there's a whole team in the kitchen who's making sure your dishes are delicious. Oh, and by the way, there's a whole team that you didn't see that was there at 7:00 in the morning to accept the produce and the meat that you're about to consume to make sure that it was perfectly delivered and handled.
How much cooking do you still actually do, and how much do you enjoy that process?
I mean, I love still doing it. I do a lot less of it in the restaurants now, but that's par for the course.
Sure.
It's okay. But I still spend time with the team doing research and development dishes and, spending time with the cooks of saying like, we just put a rack of lamb on, for example, at Spoon, and Brent, who's our meat cook there now. He's been with us for a few years. He's actually leaving soon, but we're super proud of him. I was showing him different ways of how to cook the lamb because lamb is a very different style of how you cook meat. It's not like beef. It's not like duck. And he said to me last night when I was leaving, he says, thanks so much for teaching me that. He says, it really came in handy tonight. But it's like, just stop for 30 seconds and say like, hey, here's some knowledge I know.
One thing that's impressed me in particular about you is you obviously have a life outside of the restaurants. You have a very active family life. You have very active kids. And that balancing act to me, and we all have our stories about, work, and then you got to have a balance in it. How have you managed to make that work and to make sure you carve out enough family time and important time? Because I know how important that is to you.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. I've come to the realization that it's never going to be just like anything. It's never going to be perfect. It's never going to be enough, and it's never going to be too little. Like there's always like a time that you miss one game that you didn't want to, but you make one that you didn't need to be at. It's like that's how it goes.
You got hockey in your life, right?
Hockey, baseball, football, you name it.
How old are your kids?
16, 14, and a 3.5-year-old.
Oh my goodness!
So it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's a crazy household. But I remember telling Linda, my wife, when we opened Spoon, I was 35 years old. And I remember saying to her, I said, look, personally, the goal is by the time I hit 40, which would have made Julius, my middle one, 8, and Emil would have been 11. I said, by the time I'm 40, I just want to have the flexibility to leave the restaurants whenever I want to go watch them do something. And I've told Emil this story before, but I will never forget it. He was 10 years old playing baseball, and it's Edina Rec baseball. And Linda says, there's a game tonight. If you can make it, that'd be great. And I said, I'll really try, but it's really hard. The restaurant's busy right now. It's crazy. And I remember thinking to myself at the start of service, I can leave. I can go to the game.
Right.
And so I said, I'm just going to go for like 20 minutes and then I'll come back to the restaurant at 6:30. And I get to the game, Rosie, and Emil is on deck and he's not expecting me to be there. And he's practicing his swings. And, it's kind of like, completely just like he's not going to hit the ball because no kid does, right?
Right?
It's like 50 pitches for one hit.
Right.
And he turns and he looks at and he sees me and he just stops and he smiles.
Oh man.
I didn't go back to work that night.
Oh,
I watched
you're melting me here just listening.
I watched the whole game and we went and got Dairy Queen afterwards.
Yeah.
And it was one of those moments of like, okay, the restaurant's important and that life feeds this life. So I need both. But I need to make sure to stop myself every once in a while and say, they deserve to have you there.
You won't get those moments back.
No.
And that's the one thing I realize is with adult children right now. If you got to take that time, and I had to miss a lot of stuff with my kids, with soccer games and et cetera, and you go and you make a point of going because those are the ones that you just mentioned. You won't forget that at all. Do you how much do you cook at home?
All the time.
Seriously, so
Yeah.
you get
If I'm off, I'm cooking at home.
yeah, and I mean, are you making burgers and? Are you a little exotic? What kind of taste buds do a lot of kids have pretty specific. I want chicken fingers. I want chicken. I want this. They have pretty sophisticated tastes, I would assume.
Emil, the older one, is a very sophisticated palate. Julius, the middle one, less sophisticated, getting better. Crosby's too young to pick up on it yet, right? But it's like, what did I make? So Saturday night, we had dinner at home. I did a flat iron steak. We had roasted broccolini. I made potato gratin. We had a roasted beet salad with endive and sherry vinaigrette.
Oh my!
That was Saturday meal.
Yeah.
They eat well. That's for sure.
Yeah. You're not making just peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly. No, not so much of that.
Let's switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about something that you're very passionate about, and that is the Minneapolis restaurant scene and your fellow restaurateurs. I know there's a bond and there's a cooperation. There's in terms of everything, the obstacles that you have faced and continue to face. I mean, you meaning everybody in North Loop, et cetera, whether it be COVID, when that hit, obviously recently the going back to George Floyd, recently the presence of ICE, and beyond the normal sorts of things that obstacles that restaurants face and the number of closures that occur. What's that been like just the last couple of years, just mentally for you and your fellow restaurateurs to kind of keep your head above water right now?
I mean, I would say in one word, it's been exhausting.
Yeah.
I think that, when everybody from the outside around the country looks at you and says, I don't know how you guys keep having to deal with all this, you realize how exhausting it actually has become. COVID was incredibly exhausting, but that was a nation worldwide pandemic that everybody, for the most part, was kind of in the similar boat. And so there was a lot of shared analysis and a lot of shared systems around the country. And a lot of those calls that I were on were national as well as local. So that there was a lot of support there. As we went through the murder of George Floyd and what that meant for our community, that was just a really devastating time to see history unfold in front of us in a way that was really just sad, but a reckoning that was also, if you did the work, was really incredible, right? From a perspective of how do we come together then as a community, and then the presence of ICE being in our community. I mean, that was a devastation that it completely blindsided us in a way that we never thought we'd have to deal with anything that was so pointed as an attack on us. It wasn't. I was explaining this to a friend last night. I said, it wasn't like a natural disaster where you can empathize with a tornado or a earthquake or a hurricane. It was an attack in a way that was just like so aggressive, and it shut everything down because people felt a tremendous amount of guilt and shame to go out and eat and to find entertainment and joy in anything because there wasn't joy surrounding us. And I understand that, but it has been incredibly powerful to see how the community has come back together and really shown what that looks like. And, I've been vocal about this, for better or worse. I've been vocal about this because I genuinely believe in the small business community being such an important part of our fabric. And it's an important part of our fabric because it showcases the beauty of resilience and excellence and creativity. And it's from small to big restaurant groups. It's small to big businesses and things like that. And we need to be a part of what that looks like. So it was a whirlwind, but it was exhausting.
You use the word "we" more than a couple of times, and I get the sense. I know I've had conversations with you a little bit before how supportive you are of each other, even though you are in theory in competition with each other.
Yeah,
that there's a bond between restaurateurs that if your restaurant's succeeding and the one across the street is succeeding, or FEMA's restaurant succeeding, you all will benefit from it, and that the more people that come downtown and support the restaurants, the better off everyone will be.
Yep.
That's true.
To me, if one fails, we all fail. And, Joe Raleigh, who owns Dario.
Right.
I know you've been there. So I was talking to Joe the other week and he was saying, hey, we're not getting as much reservations as we used. Like we're hurting here, that we're struggling in the traction. And so I would be in the dining room and I would talk to guests and I'd say, oh, where are you going to go eat tomorrow?
Mm-hmm.
And they say, well, I don't know. I said, you should go to Dario. And I'd send them down there. And then Joe would text me. He said, you have 4 restaurants within 3 blocks of me and you're sending people to me. And I just said, you can't fail. If you fail, we all fail. Like this isn't about my restaurants. This isn't about just your restaurant. This is about our community of restaurants. And we need to find that what that success looks like. Getting people to come back into North Loop, Northeast, Linden Hills, whatever it is, the call to action for that is not saying, come back downtown because we are now safe. Come back downtown because we are now vibrant. I'm saying come back downtown because you used to always be there. So why did you, why did you go away? What happened? What did we do? We're here trying to provide an experience and an evening for you. And what we care the most about is making you happy and nourishing you.
Are people going to be able to survive this? I mean, is there a tipping point right now? I mean, maybe that things are going to get better as we approach spring and summer, that more people will be coming out? Or is there a lot of nervous restaurateurs right now?
I think there's a lot more nervous restaurateurs than what people realize.
Yeah, really.
I think that there will be survival for restaurants. I think some are just going to maybe slip through by the skin of their teeth. I think that others, I think there are more restaurateurs one disaster away from closing.
Yeah, it's hard to hear, but it's the reality of the restaurants, period, but now in particular with what's going on. In the meantime, you've expanded. You're down in Naples, Florida now, which is kind of a home away from home for all the snowbirds in Minnesota. Yeah. You go down there, it's like you haven't left Minnesota.
It's true.
Why there? Why? What made that appealing to you?
Yeah, so there was a couple of reasons. The company that owns that land is MSD. And a good friend of mine who we opened up the Four Seasons property in Minneapolis with, she works for them now.
Okay.
And so she engaged a conversation and said, hey, I know you've talked about expansion. Would you ever be interested in this property in Naples? It's in the Four Seasons. And I said, I'm happy to look at it. I don't know. And I looked at it, and what inspired me to say yes to it was a couple of things. One, I knew that it was going to challenge me creatively. I knew that it would challenge my business, and it would challenge my reach, which was inspiring. I had come from a guy named Daniel Boulud that went from 4 restaurants to 18. So I was sort of trained into that DNA of his world of saying let's expand. But then I also wanted to make sure I expand thoughtfully. It wasn't about, to be clear, this wasn't the first out-of-state opportunity I've been offered. This was the 15th out-of-state opportunity I'd been offered. But this was the first one I ever said yes to. It felt like it was the right group of people that I was going to cook for, that I knew, that knew me. We have dishes down there that are Spoon and Stable dishes. We have dishes down there that are Belcourt dishes. We have dishes down there that people are going to recognize and understand. And you just so happen to be sitting perched up, looking at the Gulf and watching the sunset hit.
Yeah, we can't wait to get down there. It looks like a perfect venue. Any other plans locally? I mean, you mentioned Daniel and what he's done. Does Gavin want to keep pushing the pedal down a little bit and look at different spaces? Did you get that inkling to maybe do other things down the road? Yeah,
I think locally I feel content where I am locally now. That doesn't mean that I won't add 1 or 2 more things, but I don't see the need for it as of this moment. I want to continue to grow and expand. We have our sports catering business that that we cook for the Wild and the Wolves and the Lynx. And that's been one that I've really focused on lately to figure out how do we grow that nationally, because we're focused solely on the players and their well-being and their nutrition.
I will tell folks my own personal experience and my wife, Karen, if you're looking for a specific, not that any of these places aren't going to be satisfied, but if you want a special occasion, Demi to me is lights out. It's one of my favorite experiences I've ever had in any restaurant anywhere in the world because of the personal touch and the way the meal is constructed and the service you get and just sitting there and enjoying it all.
Yeah.
It's a special concept.
Yeah,
it's a really special. Plus, you get those little Rice Krispie.
They're the best. The Rice Krispie treats at the end.
That's a personal recipe.
That is.
That's
when I was 7, I started to make Rice Krispie treats, and I was too lazy to put them in a pan, so I would just eat them out of the pot. And so that's how
so
we serve
good.
them. But
Well,
it's funny with Demi, because when Demi was created, I kept hearing guests say to me at Spoon and Stable, they would say, Spoon is such a great fine dining experience. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, to me, it's not fine dining. So then I wrote down in my journal, what is the definition of fine dining?
mm-hmm.
And it took me 2 years to answer the question. And what I came to the conclusion of is that it's a personalization of the experience to the guest who shows up.
Yeah.
Now, the word restaurant comes from the word restoration, to be restored. But we culturally go out to eat and we rate experiences immediately, right? We go out to dinner and we say, oh, so Rosie, what'd you think of that steak?
Right.
1 out of 10,
Right.
which is fine. But when you go out to a place like Demi, it's not about rating the experience. It's about enjoying the experience, about being in the moment. And what's so funny about that restaurant is it's the least social media restaurant we own. Like, people take the fewest amount of photos there.
Yeah,
They post the
I understand
least
that.
there, which is beautiful because it tells me that they are in their moment, which is so awesome to me.
Well, you have a great staff everywhere we go, as I mentioned, and I think people understand how important this is, because we all benefit when the restaurant scene succeeds in the Twin Cities, in particular Minneapolis right now, and there's so many great opportunities. So, Gavin, I can't to thank you enough for coming in and spending some time with us today and educating the folks on what your experiences are like. And I know I'll be seeing you down the road because I'm always bugging you about getting a reservation somewhere. So that's the way it works. So
My pleasure. Thanks
Gavin,
for having me.
Thanks so much. Gavin Kaysen, thanks for listening. And again, I want to thank my friends at Alexis Wayzata and Maplewood, Charlie Swanson, for helping out today. And thank all of you for listening to Rosen Sports Monday.